Thank you so much for being a part of this. It's really important, and I'll talk a little bit about this once we start the session. It's really important that for me, that what we do at Music Theater Works and in the arts sector directly reflects things that are happening in our community and is part of that conversation. So that's what we're doing today. What we'll do at the beginning, I've got a few questions from everyone. I've got a few questions to ask, and then if you'd like to ask each other questions, I welcome that. I also welcome if you have questions within the panel to talk amongst yourselves. I will act hopefully as a true moderator in the fact that I will hopefully guide the conversation, but not necessarily, hopefully, throw my 2 cents in much. I probably will a little bit, just knowing me. So that's kind of the idea. I will ask at the beginning, as I introduce myself and the company, that everyone will go around and do a very short introduction as to where you're from and what you do, so that we understand everyone's perspectives as we talk about this. And I'm going to get a glass of water because I just realized I don't have that before we start.
Right. While Kyle is getting some water, I just want to take a quick moment again to say thank you to everyone for being part of this call. I appreciate you all coming together for this. This is fantastic. So thank you all for being here. This is great. I will be here for the majority of the meeting. If you need anything, if you have any questions, I'm going to keep my camera off though, so that my video doesn't try to pop in on the main screen. And those of you talking will stay in the main discussion. So thank you so much again.
All right, let's get started so we can get on with our day and have a good conversation and such. All right, here we go. Welcome everyone. My name is Kyle Dugan. I'm the producing artistic director at Music Theater Works. Welcome to another part of our Community Reach program, where we look at the ways our musicals connect to our community. Today, we're talking in conjunction with our production of Billy Elliot about trauma. Billy Elliot is about a young boy whose life is affected by the death of his mother and chaos around the surroundings, historically around the 1980s miners' strikes in England. So in order to talk about some of the themes of that musical of Billy Elliot, we have a panel discussing about trauma, childhood trauma, and I would like to start by having everyone introduce themselves. I'll start with Laura and we'll go around.
Hi, everyone. My name's Laura Lindroth. I'm the director of Programming and Community Engagement at Rainbows for All Children. And for those that may not be know what our organization is about, we are a nonprofit based in Evanston, Illinois, and we train volunteers worldwide to lead support groups for children ages 3 to 18 who have experienced some sort of loss. And usually that's the absence of a family member or some type of community crisis or something that they're going through that's life-altering. We see a lot of kids come in for things like death, divorce, incarceration, etc. So this is near and dear to the work that we do. And one of the things that we've been involved with recently was the Resilient Evanston Youth Subcommittee that's helping with the larger initiative to do to create a more trauma-informed community in the Evanston area. And that's part of the Evanston Cradle to Career that's really doing all of that. And so out of that work came this Resilient Evanston Youth Subcommittee, which I'll let Hannah talk more about, but they did an amazing exhibit recently illustrating trauma that affects youth, particularly in Evanston, and how they heal from some of those traumas that they're affected by. So thanks. Maybe I'll pass that off to Hannah.
Yeah.
Thank you.
Hannah.
Well, I'm Hannah, and with my last name also being Lindroth, I'm sure you can tell I'm Laura's daughter. But I was also on the subcommittee for the Resilient Evanston Youth Showcase. which we called it Raise. And basically, that showcase was for students and youth in Evanston to express healing through trauma through art. And so we got a number of different submissions with art pieces and poetry, written word, and then performances and dance pieces. And for me, I heal through theater. So I think this show was great. And I love that that is what Music Theater Works is trying to do.
Great. Well, thank you so much. Yeah, well, we're going to wrap back. I actually have a question about what you just said, but I'm going to let everyone introduce themselves before I come back to that, because I think that's a really interesting thing to talk about. We'll move on to Matt Miles, speaking of Music Theater Works.
Hey there. As Kyle said, I'm Matt Miles. I'm an actor and a filmmaker here in Chicago. I've been here for about a little over 20 years. I currently reside in Edgewater in the city, and I was involved with Music Theater Works production of Billy Elliot. I played the role of Dad in the show just past December.
Great, thank you. Emma, we'll move on to you.
Hi, I'm Emma. I am a programming intern at Rainbows and also one of the group facilitators. And I am a graduate student at Adler University for art therapy and counseling. Yeah, thank you for having me.
Thank you for coming. And last but not least, Kimberly.
Good morning. And again, excuse me for being off camera. I'm having some issues this morning, but I'm going to try to get it together. I am Kimberly Holmes Ross. I am the Community Engagement Director at Evanston Cradle to Career, where we work with over 40 partner agencies here at Evanston to, of course, make Evanston the most equitable place it can be. And with that, we actually sponsored the Resilient Evanston youth and the trauma exhibit that we're all so excited about and talking about. So I'm here this morning as a support person and part of that committee, and happy to be here. So thank you.
Thank you. Thank you so much. Well, I'm gonna actually head back to a door that Hannah opened to start this off. You mentioned that theater is healing for you, and one of the things that I have a question for is healing. What does that mean, and what does that mean for different people? What part of the journey is what does that mean, and what is art, and what part does art contribute to healing?
Well, I can start by talking about that. I think that everybody has different trauma and different ways to heal. But the first step in my journey, and I feel like for a lot of people, is just to face that trauma and face what has happened to you and process it and think about it and feel those emotions. And, you know, for a long time, I feel like I ran away from that. But with theater and with different forms of art, I feel like it gives people, particularly youth, a way to express themselves and express what they've gone through, maybe without being so direct. It gives, especially theater, gives a level of animosity. You don't have to be yourself, but you can still work through feelings and emotions and trauma that you've experienced. And I found I've done that for myself over the past 2 years. I've been in speech, and in speech, I do events very similar to like theater and monologues, but I get to write them and choose my topics. So I've been able to talk about things that are very particular to me and act out other people's stories that relate to myself and my trauma. And it's been extremely healing for me because you're facing your demons and you feel better afterwards.
I guess to tag on it, thank you so much for your openness and sharing that. My second question for the group, maybe Laura, if you'd like to kind of jump in on this, is what after this experience of like facing those demons, what can, obviously art allows you to feel and think and be a part of that and see it through different people's eyes. What's the next steps after that? I mean, that can bring up a lot. And how do we, as artists, how your work as a community, what do we do to not just allow people to feel, but also to help them along that journey of healing?
A great question. If I'm understanding correctly, I think you're talking a little bit about, okay, so you pour your heart and soul into this piece of work, whatever it is, whether it's a performance piece or a visual art. And sometimes that can leave us reeling with, okay, I just dumped out all this stuff and all these feelings are all over the place. And now what do I do with all of that? Yeah. And I think that's actually, Emma, I would love to hear you talk a little bit about that too, because as the art therapy kind of piece to that, what do you then take as an art therapist into that? But I know from my experience with grief, loss, and trauma and working with children, a lot of it is, it is a release of those feelings, and that alone is healing because you do want to get it out. Where we run into difficulty is when we hold in all of that stuff and we think we're going to be fine. I can deal. I'm fine. I'm going to put my shield on. I'm going to face the world, and I'm good. I'm good to go. But I'm not going to talk about any of this, and I don't want to bring it up because if I bring it up, then it's just too much, and people can't deal with it, and I don't want to deal with it. But when you let it out and it releases, whether it's through expression as an art piece or communicating that out to somebody else, telling their story or talking about their feelings with somebody, that releases it out of the body, and that alone can be very healing. So I would say just starting there is a big piece of it all. But beyond that, if you're somebody that's helping somebody through this and supporting them as they're doing art, or as maybe you're the director like Kyle of a play and you see your artists are really feeling a lot from the play that they're in or something like that, I think, again, encouraging them to talk about it and say, hey, what's going on here? Is this stirring up some stuff for you? Is there anything that, you maybe want to talk about, or is there somebody else that I can help you find to talk about it if it's not me? And just allow them that space. I think that alone can be
great. Sorry,
very healing. No, go ahead.
Would that be the same for audience members? What's the difference? I mean, obviously we talk a lot about that, and we have a lot of conversations internally about intimacy and those feelings. What about audience members? Emma, maybe this is where we kind of come to you. Where can people go what can people do when they start to address some of the things, maybe experiencing some art or experiencing a situation that they hadn't thought about and now are looking for somewhere to continue that conversation?
Yeah, that's a good question. I mean, everybody's process is different. So I think as guides and facilitators and directors and teachers, our job is to be as flexible as possible with whoever we're working with, and making sure that we know everybody's journey is different and every type of healing looks different for every person going through something. In terms of audience members, I don't know. I would say, like, definitely making sure to know when you're being triggered, and to reach out and to try and find a space where you can address those triggers. And if art is the trigger for that, then that can be, really scary, but that can also be really healing. And that can be a signal to that person that can be a guidance for them, that can help them open up. So I think that then, turning to the community, looking for resources, hopefully something that is being offered to them. You know, I think it's really hard to try to look for help when you really need it. I think it's a lot easier to get help when it's, you know, when you already have the tools and the resources in front of you. So I think when doing showcases like we've done, or, you know, doing plays like you've done, I think definitely offering resources, acknowledging in the program or, you know, before or after the show that, you know, the topics that might come up, the triggers that might come up for people, and then the next steps that they can take, you know, community organizations they can contact, art therapy spaces, community workshops, things like that.
Great, great. So speaking of art and artists, Matt, I'd like to kind of gear this back to you and ask the question is, obviously we've been talking a lot about the actor and the audience, specifically separate. What do you feel is the relationship between the actor, the audience, the theater, and how we communicate, express ourselves and kind of relate in, you know, between this, what we call the fourth wall, which is this imaginary thing that separates us from the audience, but still obviously are experiencing something together?
That's a great question. Actually, I think it all is a complete blend, or it should be a blend at the end of the day. The idea is, I think that the theater as an organization, both from the artists that they're working with, as well as all the way down to the production and the materials that they are presenting to an audience, should go in correlation together. And ultimately, at the end of the day, it's our responsibility as artists, whether that is an actor on stage, whether that is someone who's designing elements for the show, whether that's the playwright or the lyricist or whomever it may be. We all have a responsibility at the end of the day to bring awareness to whatever themes and topics are being discussed in a show. For me, specifically, if I go see a show, I either want to understand the material that's going on with it and how it relates to me and how I can learn from that experience, or whatever the themes are, to gain further understanding or an education about it. A great example is just in Billy Elliot. I unfortunately lost my mother this past July. She passed away. And even in this show, I have to deal with losing my spouse, and bringing those personal experiences to it, of being able to talk about these certain circumstances that people have to deal with, whether it's losing jobs, whether it's losing people, whether it's something that's happened in our childhood or our adult life, just specifically to Billy Elliot, not to mention anything else. I think there's a great way to kind of bring that together, just like we're doing here with the discussions of both what's happening on stage and what people are dealing with, but also off stage and how that connects. I think it allows gates to be opened where people who generally feel like a lot of times they either don't think about the topics until they're presented to them and they see them on stage, or they always have a topic or something that they want to discuss. And I think that the artistic elements and what the theater is presenting, this is their chance to actually kind of open that door, so that they have a reason, or not an excuse, that's lack of better terms, but a way to talk about that everyone else has experienced the same thing, and they feel now is acceptable that they could talk about it. Specifically, a lot of males, I think, too, in our society feel like they can't show their sensitive side a lot of times. And seeing somebody else go through something where they've opened up and had a cathartic moment or an experience, they can now say, hey, I relate to this person. Can we talk about this, since these topics are now out in the open and we've seen other people go through that similar experience?
And I think that's really important too, the conversation we've had before, Matt, about the idea of this musical. Billy Elliot is about mostly men addressing a lot of fear, loss of job, loss of family members, and a young boy and how that affects him. What is important, both, I guess, from the script side and from the reality of what we live in? Of course, what we do is in theater reflects the reality. I mean, Billy Elliot is a moment in history. It takes place a moment in history, though they're not real characters, the real people. It takes place in a real time and place.
Right.
What's important for adults to understand when it comes to youth that are experiencing trauma, either simultaneously or separately from the adults in their lives? I'll open that up to anyone who'd like to answer that.
I can certainly speak about that, but I would love Kim to also talk if you would feel comfortable doing that, Kimberly. I know you work a lot with youth, and I don't know if that's something that you would want to talk about.
Absolutely. Just can you just reiterate just a little more on the question? I'd be happy to.
The question is mainly, if I can remember what I said, mainly, what do adults do to understand about youth experiencing traumas? What's important for adults to understand when it comes to helping or understanding youth that are experiencing trauma? And sometimes those adults are experiencing trauma simultaneously, similar to what's happening in Billy Elliot. How do adults help?
Yeah, absolutely. Well, what I found and what we found in the work is to listen, to really listen, and not then take our traumas and then put them, onto the kids and our idea of what should happen and what should be. Really, really listening and letting youth and young adults kind of guide us into the support that they need. So for me, as far as I'm concerned, that listening piece is, key to begin the steps, and then connecting to resources. And fortunately, here in Evanston, we have a lot of resources. So, once we build that relationship and that trust, and have young people begin to open up, connecting them to the right resources is for me next steps. So listening and connecting would be my answer.
And I guess to tag on to that, thank you, Kimberly. The other question I have is, Billy Elliot has a lot to do with generational violence. Billy's dad hits his brother. Billy's brother hits his dad. Billy, in the end of the show, hits another little boy at a ballet class. And a lot of that physical violence actually is reflected, and waves of violence come through generations in the musical. What do we do? How do we address that as a community, as artists? Obviously, we present that to the stage, but what do we do to stop the cycle?
I can speak a little bit to that. And I think address to also just following up with what Kim said too. I think the thing that people don't always understand is that children grieve differently than adults, and it reflects in the way that they then behave. You can see the differences, and a lot of that has to do with maturity and the experiences of the world that they've had. They're limited compared to an adult, and then also the brain development. And so when they grieve a loss or a traumatic event, they do it in short spurts. We call them sad attacks at Rainbows, which are just, they can only grieve for so long before they just really can't tolerate it. And so they move on. So you'll see things like, they've just experienced a significant event, and they're like right outside playing basketball and, hanging with their friends. And you're like, what's up, dude? Do you even care? Like, what's going on? And it isn't that they don't care. It's that they cannot process what's going on. They just can only do it in these short little spurts. And so adults will look at that then and go, oh, well, this child is fine. Look, they're playing with their friends. They're off, doing whatever, and they're normal. And, I'm not worried about them. When in reality, they are grieving and they are going through all of this, but they're doing it in these bursts, and they're hiding a lot of it too. And so, and especially as teenagers, as they get older, it's much easier for them to hide those kinds of things. And so it's really digging at what's going on. And a lot of the questions that need to be asked are, instead of saying things like, you know, why did you do that? I can't believe you did this, this, and this. Or, you know, looking at the behaviors, because frequently their feelings are going to be demonstrated through behaviors that they do. And so, you know, we look at them and we go, well, why are you doing that? And they can't even explain why they're doing it. So the better question to ask is really, what happened to you? What is going on? You know, what happened? Was there something that occurred? Because then they can start to talk about that thing that happened, and it opens them up to that. And they may not be able to say it right then, but it at least gets that question up and addressed, rather than like, why are you doing the things that are a result of you not being able to cope with that? And so back to your question, Kyle, of, you know, what do we do with what they, you know, when you see the patterns of this going on through generations, those are coping mechanisms. They're poor coping mechanisms, but that was the way that that family survived whatever it was that they went through initially. And then when they're, you know, expressing themselves through that poor coping mechanism of being violent, that's then the violence that is traumatic for that next generation, and they're coping in that same way. And there isn't any other way that they know, because that's the way that's been taught. So it's interrupting that pattern by teaching a different way of seeing this. Okay, let's address what's going on with you. What happened to you? Well, I'm getting hit, you know, I'm not, like, I'm being beaten at home, or whatever, you know, the thing is that's going on. And then to start to talk about that, and how do we get, when we are angry, because you are going to feel those feelings, what is a way that you can express yourself that isn't so violent and that can take you in a different direction with that? So whether that's, you know, punching a pillow, or maybe it's even moving them away from the whole thing of violence and, you know, even that act, into maybe you love to draw and it's drawing for you. Maybe it's theater where you can express yourself, you know, through a big part and a dramatic part. But whatever it is for that child, it isn't always art, you know, maybe it's something else for them, to be able to release that and to see the pattern as well, and to recognize it, because until you can see it and see that that was a coping mechanism and learn to forgive as well, you know, there's a whole piece of forgiveness that we haven't even talked about on healing. So there's a lot to it than just that, but those are some pieces of it anyway.
Matt, maybe you might be able to talk a little bit about that from your character's journey and how that feels for you.
Yeah, it's so, again, I think this goes back to a responsibility that it's as an actor and as a performer, of being conscious of what is in the material that you're performing, and how do you try. I think there's a fine line to respecting either what the original story is, but also trying to figure out as an actor how you put something on it that is not just, you have to find an understanding of why someone behaves in the way that they do, because then you, to Laura's point, you get to the root of what the behavior is about. For instance, I have another piece coming up that is material about the Emmett Till trial, and I play one of the murderers in it. And it's a coping mechanism of me as an actor to try and identify how someone could be a murderer, and exhibiting those behaviors of someone, and trying to understand what that is, so that then you can take that discussion point and figure out, kind of back it up, and also figure out how to have discussion points when you aren't on stage, of this behavior became this way because of these reasons. And then once you identify those reasons, you can work to, I think, fix that going forward. Another example of that is, and I think a lot of material lately is getting better with writers, the show Sex Education that's on Netflix right now has done a really nice job presenting a lot of, there's one character, Adam, who has severe, he wants to cause physical harm to things, and he doesn't understand why internally. Like it's a physical behavior of his. And once he's talked to another character, they identify that, to Laura's point, there's an activity with a pillow that she got from a therapist, that she's like, if you take it out on a pillow, perhaps that behavior will come out and you will identify those feelings, and that through it, you can identify why you're upset. But without that type of material being presented to an audience, or without going to therapy, I joke a lot that my job has saved me thousands of dollars of therapy because it allows me to work through that. People who don't do this job, who are not in our career, don't have that ability, or they're not presented a lot of times with the resources. And I think the more that people can be open about that, to say, hey, if we can talk through these things, we find the resources, a lot of that type of behavior can bring about resolving that, hopefully. And I think that we also, again, have responsibility as an actor and writers and people who are presenting that material to find that, so we can have open discussions about it, so that it's not scary either to talk about.
Yeah, and I think it's funny that you mentioned that, because I was just thinking as you were saying that how the language we use and to describe what we do as artists, especially performing artists, when it comes to what we call an objective, what the character wants and how they get it, which is what we call tactic. It is very similar to what we're talking about here, from the mental health standpoint of it, of like really understanding the base aspects of what the characters want and how they get it. So I think that's quite interesting. Now, I guess I want to bring it back to Hannah. What do we do as leaders, as adults in our community, as artists, as artists, as leaders, as adults, to do better, to have these conversations, to support kids, and to support our community?
You know, I think there is so much to be done. I think on an individual basis, the people that you interact with every day, the kids that you're directly in communication with, I think, like Kimberly said, just listening very intently and without external motives to try and fix, or, you know, don't have a set idea of what you think this person needs, and listen to what they're telling you they need. And then I think just always advocating for a safe space, and making sure, you know, kids are in a good place. I think often teens and youth are afraid to express when they're having a bad day, because, you know, some people don't provide a safe space for those struggling mentally. So I think a lot of kids are scared of punishment. And so just making sure that you're looking at the cause of their actions and checking in too. Yeah. And then always advocating for more resources and better resources and a better future where more identities are supported and we see better representation of youth in all sorts of forms. I think, like, you know, even 20, 30 years ago, a show about drag queens and even a show addressing trans identity wouldn't exist. But now I see so many youth coming out more and more with fluid gender expression and being open about your sexuality. And I think for me, like in my queerness, that was definitely brought out in theater and supported there by that community. And I think art has a way of accepting people and letting all identities be known. But yeah, just telling more stories with more representation. And
well, I will say that I hope to do that for many years at Music Theater Works. So as a young queer kid to another, thank you for saying that. I appreciate that. Kimberly, you had your hand raised.
I did, but Hannah articulated it so well. Because I was really gonna say, creating those safe spaces, where teens are, able to express, how they're feeling and not being ready to fix everything. There's, some things don't need fixing right away. We really just need to have a space where, kids feel safe in their feelings. So, I had my hand raised, but thank you, Hannah. That was a wonderful answer.
Well, I would like to tag on to that really quickly. When it comes to safe space, we hear that word a lot. And I think in university settings, which I was at before, there's a lot of conversation, but the general public is not as aware of what that means for what safe space means. Maybe Emma or Laura, if you'd like to maybe talk about what does those two words mean to you, and what we can do to continue to provide that for folks.
Yeah, well, I know that Matt has his hand up, so I want to make sure he gets, if he has something to add here.
Oh, he said it's okay. It's okay.
Oh yeah, it's fine. This is piggybacking off of what Kimberly and we have. My question is more a question for everybody, so I'll wait.
Okay. So safe space.
Yeah, I mean, it really comes down to resources. So it's, as a student, it's, hard for me to answer that in a concrete way in terms of the safe space itself. Patience, understanding, listening, active listening. I think those notions that you mentioned of generational trauma is really, really important and is so hard for people to recognize, because once you get stuck in a pattern and a way of doing things, that's your comfort zone. It's really hard to break that. So I think creating a space where people can acknowledge their patterns and learn to break them. I met a youth recently who mentioned the way that her grandmother parented her mother and the way that her mother parented her, and how she was going to be the one to break the cycle. And I thought that was a really, really intuitive and beautiful and moving thing for a kid to acknowledge. And so I think making sure we create those spaces where people can acknowledge that and where people feel safe enough to know what that means. So with that, education, teaching people what that is, what generational trauma is, and how those cycles work, and that these patterns continue when you see, the way that your mother was raised, and you see that she raised you with similar ways, and you acknowledge that that doesn't feel good, then finding a way to break that cycle. And that takes creating a space where you can feel heard. And yeah, it all comes down to resources. So finding those spaces, I'm still in the early stages of learning how to do that. So definitely, interning with Rainbows has been really interesting in that way. So I can see what to model future programs after, and kind of how to get the word out about spaces like this that allow kids to access their trauma in a way that is safe for them and comfortable.
That's great. That's great. Matt, come back to you.
Yeah,
could I just jump in on that real quick? I just wanted to add just one little piece. I'm sorry, Matt. I don't mean to jump in on you.
No, it's okay.
So Emma, thank you so much, and thank you for the kind words about Rainbows too, and that you're seeing that there. I mean, certainly that's what we want to provide with the support groups that we offer, as a safe and confidential space, and we're kind of all about that. But I think one of the things that's most important as an adult trying to provide that safe space for children is really the non-judgmental piece of it, and it is, you have to check your own biases. What are you coming into this with? We talk a lot about that with the children who have faced an incarcerated parent, because there's so much stigma around that, and that people feel like they're going to repeat what their parent did and all this kind of stuff, and they judge the parent. It's not like a parent that died that you feel, oh, I'm so sorry your parent died, oh, your parent's in jail. Like, there's this whole thing around that. And so we talk a lot about that with facilitators, with the checking their own bias with that. But really, it's with everything, you know, whether it's an LGBTQ thing or, you know, anything. It's, you know, it's really what are we coming with in judging this child when they're telling this story. So I think that's an important piece of it too. I just wanted to mention that real quick. Matt, we are on to you, man. So patient.
Wait, can I add something really quick?
Yeah, no, good.
Not yet. I just wanted to say, like, yes, absolutely. And kids are so, I mean, they're coming from such a judgmental world where they're used to being judged and they're used to that type of behavior, and creating a space where they can have it's something different, where they can know that they're not going to be judged and they're going to be heard and they're going to be listened to. Yeah, that's all I think is really important. It's like creating an alternative space where you are normalizing, not normalizing, but accepting their pain, you know, and like, you know, Laura was saying, oh, wow, that's, you know, that's crazy. You know, if they say something shocking, you know, yeah, that happened to you. I hear you and I accept that. And that's not crazy and that's not wild and that's not absurd. And you are absolutely in the normal range, you know, of emotional expression for having that reaction. Yeah, and just, yeah, creating an alternative space where they're, you know, not being judged like they are everywhere else in the world.
All right, Matt, it's your turn.
This is a kind of a two-parter, but this kind of piggybacks off of both Kimberly and Emma's point. Specifically Emma's point of the person that she has experienced who said, I want to break this cycle. I've been very fortunate enough to have parents who are extremely encouraging for my arts background and my education. And they wanted to give as much as they could to make sure that I got a good educational foundation. And I've also had a mentor who's currently my mentor. He's a professor and he's in theater as well. With that being said, I guess my question is, and it's been raised a little bit about the responsibility that parents and teachers do have, but because of the environment that I was raised in, I'm curious as to, for me, I was given a lot of artistic areas to express those types of material and to work through. But I know for a lot of teens and kids, they may not be in areas in the United States that they have that resource readily available. And it could be something alternative. It could be sports, or it could be art that just aren't available. So I'm curious as to what a little bit of the responsibility is for educators and parents or adults for kids to try and encourage that behavior that is healthy behavior, especially around areas that they may, the areas that they live in regionally may not have those resources all the time, or they may not have a ton of finances towards those resources. How do educators and parents either seek out that material, or how do they find a way to give that to students and kids if it's not readily available? Does that make sense?
And I would tag onto that as a nonprofit theater company. We're talking about this regularly. It's like, how do we provide theater to our community that is of course financially restrictive to the community to be able to experience art, et cetera, et cetera. So yes, please, anyone who'd like to jump in.
Yeah, that is a tough one. I think fortunately with technology and the resources that we have nowadays, there is a lot of stuff online. And there are resources, and especially through COVID, one of the things that's come out of all of this is that there's more and more mental health resources that are available through teletherapy now and things. So that's a great thing. And I know a lot of the local ones in the Chicagoland area and even in Evanston were even stepping up and giving sessions for free during that time. So it's really a matter of tapping into where do I find those resources. The National Children's Alliance is a great national umbrella organization to point people in different directions of where to find resources. So that's one. And then actually Cradle to Career, we're the, Kim and I are part of the Evanston Cradle to Career, but Cradle to Career is actually a national initiative as well that's throughout various communities. And because part of what they do is bring partner organizations together as a community working together, they're very often like a 311 type of thing for a community. So those are great resources in general. I know the Evanston Care Network is a huge avenue for us to find resources for all sorts of different things. And there are those kinds of networks in other communities around the nation. But, really it's checking what is available. So, as a nonprofit, I totally understand that. Like we want to give our Rainbows program to everybody all the time too, because we're like, man, we don't want money to be a reason that you can't help the children in your community, right? But we also have to keep the lights on and pay the bills, and and so you always struggle with that. I think what you're doing is so important because you've brought together other organizations in other ways that are part of that theater experience. So you had, for instance, the youth trauma exhibit on display at your theater where anybody walking off the street could come in and enjoy that, whether they went to the performance or not. Talking about theater or choosing theater productions that are important, that talk about important issues and start to provoke people into having these conversations, and then engaging the audience in that is also important. And I know that, you all offer, discounts and scholarships and all kinds of ways to help make that happen for people. So I think, there's obviously, we all want to do more, but I think what you're doing is so great, and it's really tapping into those things like that. So helping to direct as an adult and if you're in a community where there aren't those resources available and it is more difficult and challenging to find them, I think it's working with kids on what is it that you like to do? What brings you joy? What is the thing that you're excited about? And tapping into that, whatever that is. And, not everything costs money either. There's ways around finding things that can be really enjoyable for them and linking them together with those to give them that piece of, tapping into that resource for them.
Well, thank you. Thank you for saying that. That is a perfect way to wrap this up today. And thank you all for being a part of this. Thank you so much for spending your Sunday morning with us, chatting about this. It's a very important subject and how we can all continue as a community to support each other. And thank you to the viewers for watching a part of our Community Reach program here at Music Theater Works. And one more time, Laura, the local resource of your organization, how do people get in touch, or if they need support, how does that happen?
Sure. So as I said earlier, and I kind of jumbled my words, so I'll say it again, but what we do is we train volunteers in community-based sites worldwide to be able to provide free support groups for children ages 3 to 18. And generally they're grieving some sort of absence of a family member or some sort of community crisis, a racial trauma, a pandemic, etc. So almost every child is going through something right now. But what we do is we can train anyone over the age of 18 that has a clean federal background check to be able to facilitate these groups. We give you an online training, a whole facilitator manual. We can work with you on the fee for that. And they can then take that and run that in their community. So it empowers the community to really take ownership of what's going on in their community with youth. To be able to provide that resource. So Matt, when you're saying, what do we do if there's no resources? Well, here's one that they can very easily adopt. And then a second thing is to make sure that families are aware that this is a resource for them that's always offered for free. And in some of our sites, they also take our parent program. So they have a parent program that supports grieving parents as well. We have one for young adults in certain communities, and we've even adapted the curriculum for kids on the autism spectrum and other developmental differences, kids that are in domestic violence, 30-day emergency shelters, and things like that. So really, it's for everybody. So if there isn't one in your community, please contact us and we can certainly help get one started. And the easiest thing is just to go to our website, rainbows.org, and all the information is there.
Thank you. Thank you so much again, all of you, for joining us. And thanks for viewers for watching our Community Reach program here at Music Theater Works. Have a good day. All right. We'll cut
Thank
there.
you.
Thank you. Hey, Sarah, can you pause it and save it?
Let me see if it lets me. Oh, since you're the host, you have to stop.
I just have to push pause and save?
I think so.
Okay, hold on. Pause.